wherewithal to address and manage our serious and genuine differences, and to do so in a way that is strengthening, not deleterious to the rules of the international system that have allowed China to achieve so much progress in its development. We seek a model of relationship that is marked not by strategic rivalry, but
This hearing of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee will come to order. We appreciate Ambassador Russel being with us and our other panelists. There is no question that one of our biggest foreign policy challenges is getting the relationship between the United States and China and the rebalance to the Asia-Pacific right. Today's hearing explores the U.S.-China relationship, and coming as it does just in advance of next month's U.S.-China strategic and economic dialogue, allows us to reflect on other issues beyond the Middle East that will also shape the 21st century. China is soon to become the world's largest economy, whether measured in purchasing price parity or raw GDP. Consider that more concrete has been poured in China in the past handful of years than in all of the United States during the 20th century. 8 of the world's 12 largest container ports are in China. China is on the move, but the question, on the move to what? Will China become a trade partner committed to the enforcement of international law, or will we see 19th century mercantilist behavior and the flouting of international norms? Will China help to support peace and stability in Asia, or seek to overturn the order? Will China open space for its citizens to express their views and ideas, or will it continue, like Cuba, to brutally repress its own people? In the last year alone, a crackdown has swept away more than 150 journalists, lawyers, and activists. The bottom line is that there are reasons for hope, but there are also concerns for pessimism. The fact is, U.S. exports to China have increased by almost $40 billion in the past 4 years alone, from $67 billion to $106 billion, creating and sustaining millions of U.S. jobs in sectors across the board, from automobiles and power generation, machinery, aircraft, and other vital industrial sectors. That speaks to the potential of our partnership. At the same time, U.S. firms complain of cyber-enabled theft of intellectual property rights or just plain old-fashioned theft when trying to do business in China. Equally or more troubling still, we have seen an increasingly provocative China on the seas, coercing and intimidating neighbors in both the East China Sea and South China Sea, and attempting to use the threat of military force to address territorial and regional disputes. China's provocative actions in the South China Sea threaten not just regional stability, but long-standing U.S. interests in the free flow of commerce, freedom of navigation, and in the peaceful diplomatic resolution of disputes consistent with international law. Likewise, China's continued deliberate and provocative actions in and around Japanese territory run the risk of sparking a broader regional crisis. So I look forward to our panelists' thoughts on how we should evaluate the strategic and economic realities unfolding with the rise of China. How do we reconceptualize the problems we face? How do we turn them into opportunities? How do we make sure allies and partners have the resources they need in the context of China's rise? And how do we work with China through such mechanisms as the SSD at the Strategic and Economic Dialogue to assure that disagreements need not lead to conflict? And with that, let me recognize the distinguished ranking member, Senator Corker, for his remarks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for calling this hearing. And I want to thank the witnesses for being here and sharing their wisdom with us. It's been exactly 1 year since President Obama and President Xi Jinping gathered at Sunnylands to chart a new course for U.S.-China bilateral relations. Analysts were optimistic that the summit would set a tone for greater cooperation between the United States and China on a range of issues, including North Korea. However, as we convene here a year later, the prospects for enhanced cooperation seem fairly dim. Indeed, we are facing a period of increasingly strained relations between Washington and Beijing, with issues such as China's continued aggressiveness in the East and South China Seas, as well as serious ongoing issues with Chinese cyber theft. Moreover, I'm troubled that the Obama administration doesn't appear to have a clear China policy or a strategy to address Beijing's continued disregard for international norms, including economic rules of the road. And it's deeply disconcerting to me that the negotiations on the Trans-Pacific Partnership, which has the potential to be a game changer in the Asia-Pacific by cementing free trade principles in the region and potentially influencing Chinese behavior, they continue to drag on absent high-level political engagement from the administration. The U.S.-China bilateral relationship is one of the most important and consequential relationships for U.S. political, economic, and strategic interests. Yet China appears to be positioning itself increasingly as a geopolitical and strategic rival to the United States. The pace and lack of transparency with respect to the Chinese military modernization, coupled with China's actions in the East and South China Seas, has cast a doubt on the idea of the peaceful rise of China. Despite these challenges, I still see great opportunities to strengthen cooperation, specifically the conclusion of successful negotiations on bilateral investment treaty, which has the potential to benefit U.S. businesses. I look forward to hearing from Assistant Secretary Russel, from our second panel of experts, on whether the time has come to rethink U.S. policy towards China and other issues I'm sure they will bring up. And again, I want to thank you, Mr. Chairman, for calling this hearing.
Thank you, Senator Corker. Our first panelist is Daniel Russel, the Assistant Secretary of State for East Asia and Pacific Affairs. Ambassador, your full statement is going to be included in the record without objection. I would ask you to try to summarize it in about 5 minutes or so we can enter into a dialogue. And with that, you're recognized.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Ranking Member Corker, I appreciate the opportunity to testify today on U.S.-China relations. And I thank you also for your bipartisan support of our Asia policy. I'm also honored to participate with one of America's most accomplished diplomats, China experts, and a good friend of mine, Ambassador Roy, and with another important contributor, Dr. Friedberg. This year marks the 35th anniversary of the official diplomatic relations between the U.S. and China. We've made remarkable progress during that time. There's enormous potential, moreover, for further progress that benefits both our countries, our neighbors, and the world. To achieve this progress, we seek a relationship defined not by strategic rivalry, but by fair and healthy competition, by practical cooperation on priority issues, and by constructive management of differences. As President Obama has made clear, we seek and welcome the emergence of a stable, peaceful, and prosperous China that respects and supports global rules and universal values. Our two economies are intertwined, so China's growth fuels our own and promotes the region's prosperity, a prosperity underpinned by America's enduring security commitments and engagement. Many of our interests coincide, so China's expanding regional role can complement the sustained U.S. strategic engagement in the Asia-Pacific. Mr. Chairman, we do not seek to contain China. To the contrary, we want China to contribute to the stability and development of the region by exercising restraint, by upholding the basic rules on which the international system is built, rules that China helps formulate and benefits from. So to advance this goal, we maintain an intense pace of high-level bilateral engagement. In 2 weeks, our countries will hold the U.S.-China Strategic and Economic Dialogue, the SNED, in Beijing. This important annual dialogue is led by Secretaries Kerry and Liu with their Chinese counterparts and covers virtually every aspect of our relationship. The strategic track includes our highest-ranking joint civilian-military exchange with China. We'll seek progress on challenges in Africa, South Asia, the Middle East, We'll discuss concerns like maritime disputes and China's behavior in the South and East China Sea, as well as cybersecurity and terrorism. And we'll further our important efforts with China on the world's most pressing nuclear proliferation challenges, North Korea and Iran. In the economic track, we'll work to strengthen global economic recovery. China's leaders have announced plans for economic reforms that, if realized, could go a long way in moving China's economy towards fair market principles. Growing Chinese direct investment in the United States contributes to jobs here at home, and our bilateral investment treaty negotiations hold the potential for greater benefit. We will work on climate change, energy, and environment issues where the U.S. and China share common interests and responsibilities as the two largest energy consumers and carbon emitters. And we will raise our concerns about the worsening human rights situation, as senior U.S. officials invariably do. Just this month, for example, China harshly suppressed any commemoration of the 25th anniversary of the violent Tiananmen Square crackdown, with cases of harassment, detention, and arrests of journalists, lawyers, activists. We will also expand exchange programs that foster long-term mutual understanding through the annual U.S.-China consultation on people-to-people exchanges. 235,000 Chinese students studied in the U.S. last year, and we're increasing the number of Americans who study in China. And 1.8 million Chinese visitors last year contributed nearly $10 billion to our economy. Mr. Chairman, the U.S.-China relationship has made great strides over these decades, and we are committed to building on that progress. Together, we seek to create a quote-unquote new model of relations built on practical cooperation and constructive management of differences that strengthens the international system to the benefit of our countries and the world. Thank you, and I look forward to your questions.
Well, thank you. It sounds like a rather rosy picture. Let me delve into it a little bit. So when China speaks of a new type of great power relationship, what is it that the administration interprets in that phrase? Is that China just laying down a marker for gaining greater say in its own backyard? And what is our response to that?
The new model concept is something that was discussed in depth in the Sunnylands meeting a year ago that Senator Corker referred to. There are those in China who seek to define a new model as if it were the creation of a sphere of influence by China in the Asia-Pacific region, and the respect, quote unquote, by the United States and the international community for certain, quote, core interests, as if it was not legitimate for the United States and others to hold positions on certain issues. We see the prospect of so-called new model very differently. To the President and to the administration, to the United States, the goal is a model that is defined by practical cooperation on issues of genuine significance to the U.S., China, and to the world. Real issues, not boutique issues, along with the ability and the wherewithal to address and manage our serious and genuine differences, and to do so in a way that is strengthening, not deleterious to the rules of the international system that have allowed China to achieve so much progress in its development. We seek a model of relationship that is marked not by strategic rivalry, but by healthy competition.
Mm-hmm. So, and that's what we see. What does China see when it says that it seeks a relationship that is based on a great power, a new great power paradigm?
When the Chinese officials talk about the new model, typically they talk about win-win outcomes, and they talk about respect for core interests. we're all for win-win outcomes, but we're not for slogans. What we care about and what we seek to achieve is meaningful cooperation. So at the upcoming SNED, for example, on the security, on the strategic track, which, as I mentioned, brings together high-level civilian as well as military officers in the strategic security dialogue under it, we engage on issues like the conduct of China in the South China Sea and the East China Sea. We engage directly on issues of human rights, including the repressive practices in Xinjiang and Tibet. We do not consider so-called core interests to be out of bounds for substantive discussion, and we hold China to account for its behavior.
Well, when we talk about hoping that China will be part of an international order that will observe international rules, and you talk about the South China Sea, is our carefully calibrated balance between cooperation and competition still the right approach? Should we be putting a little more on the competition side and demonstrating in more robust terms our enduring national interests and freedom of navigation, the free flow of commerce, and the peaceful resolution of disputes consistent with international law?
Mr. Chairman, we believe that competition and cooperation coexist in the U.S.-China relationship. We seek healthy competition on the basis of a set of accepted global norms. We welcome the right and the ability of China to participate in shaping and updating rules, but on the condition that China accepts that rules are binding on it as well as on others. Rules apply not only to small countries, but to large ones. We are strengthening our diplomatic engagement throughout the region. We have significantly strengthened our military alliances and our security relationships. Our presence in the life and in the security of the Asia-Pacific is robust. The Prime Minister of Singapore is in Washington today. I think he had the opportunity to call on you and other members of the committee. Singapore, for example, is not only an important security partner of the United States, not only an important co-negotiator in the effort to achieve a uniquely high-standard comprehensive trade agreement, the TPP. Singapore is also a charter member in ASEAN, a regional grouping that the Obama administration has invested a great deal of diplomatic effort in supporting.
I appreciate that, but you know, this committee has expressed itself, as has the Senate, about its concerns about the way China is acting in the South China Sea. And while there maybe there's legitimate disputes on territories, the manner in which so far it seems to be addressed is a more muscular China versus more of a China driven by international order in which it seeks to solve its disputes through international order. And that is a concern. Let me turn to another concern. We talk about competition. Well, when I look at intellectual property issues, I was in China was it last year that we were in China? In August, and throughout the region. And I always try to meet with the American Chamber of Commerce in different countries to get a perspective of the realities on the ground about the challenges of doing business for American companies in a given country. And a 2013 American Chamber of Commerce China survey found that 72% of respondents, which reflected a lot of what I heard when I was there, said that China's IPR enforcement was either ineffective or totally ineffective. The U.S. International Trade Commission estimated that U.S. intellectual property-intensive firms that conducted business in China lost $48 billion in sales, royalties, and license fees in 2009 because of IPR violations there. In certain sectors, such as wind power, where American superconductor has been severely harmed by IP theft in its Chinese partner, Sinovel, the damage to U.S. businesses has been particularly acute. It's estimated that an effective IPR enforcement regime in China that would be comparable to U.S. levels could increase employment IP-intensive firms here in the United States by 923,000 jobs. So where does intellectual property rights in our competition and discussion with China rank on the list of priorities on the wide range of issues that we have with China?
Mr. Chairman, the protection of intellectual property rights is a top priority for the administration, and I can personally attest to the fact that President Obama, Vice President Biden, Secretary Kerry, and other cabinet secretaries have raised our concerns very directly with Chinese leaders, and including and particularly the Vice Premier, the Premier, Li Keqiang, who has responsibility for the economy. This is on the agenda as a priority issue for the upcoming SNED.
But we've had this on the agenda. Now, this is not new to the agenda, right? So what is the progress we've made? I mean, I understand in this dialogue, but where has the dialogue taken us on making advancements? So far, I don't see it.
Well, there are points of measurable progress with respect to motion pictures, with respect to pharmaceuticals, but I fully agree with your point that China still has a long way to go to meet acceptable international standards in protecting the IPR. One thing that is different is the fact that the Chinese themselves now realize that they increasingly have more to lose as Chinese companies develop products and as Chinese consumers suffer from the poison or the other deleterious effects of fake pharmaceuticals and counterfeit products. We use our regular working group on IPR to delve down on very specific issues. We have made a strong push to educate Chinese consumers and manufacturers to the fact that they lose in the race for innovation. They lose in the race for entrepreneurship when they flagrantly violate the rule of law and they rely on the theft or the forced transfer of U.S. or other technology and products as the driver of their industries. A related problem, Mr. Chairman, is the use of cyber-enabled theft of U.S. companies' intellectual property and proprietary information, theft that we have identified as enabled in some cases by Chinese government or Chinese military officials. This is an issue that we raise forcefully, and it's an area where we will continue to push for Chinese to take action.
Many other questions. Let me turn to Senator Corker, recognizing that there is a vote that is ongoing. Senator Cardin, have you voted in the last vote? So I'll let Senator Cardin chair. I'll leave, come back, and we'll try to keep the hearing going and respect everybody's time. Senator Corker.
Again, thank you for being here. I can't help but notice that Secretary Kerry's bigger issues, time-wise, seem to lie in the Middle East. Secretary Sherman's spending 100% of her time on Iran negotiations. We had a good meeting this morning. And Secretary Burns is leaving. Who is responsible at the State Department for our China policy?
Secretary Kerry personally is responsible and is engaged directly in overseeing our China policy. I met with Secretary Kerry at some length last week to discuss it. I have accompanied Secretary Kerry to China. I will again next week when he makes his 6th visit to Asia. He's on the phone with his Chinese counterparts. He is in regular receipt of the reports that our Ambassador Baucus submit or that I send up. I have found, and I can attest, Senator, to the fact that Secretary Kerry and Deputy Secretary Burns and all of our undersecretaries are focused and engaged on the Asia-Pacific broadly, but particularly on the U.S.-China relationship.
And what is their constructive policy to persuade China to not have the antagonistic relations that it has with its neighbors?
Well, we have outlined clearly the principles that we believe should guide China and all the countries in the region with respect to maritime security, which includes obviously the respect for freedom of navigation and overflight, unimpeded lawful commerce, and insist that only peaceful resolution of disputes is in consistency with international law is the acceptable vehicle for responding. There is, however, as you've pointed out, Senator, a pattern of behavior on the part of the Chinese that is straining China's relations with its neighbors and raising questions about China's intention. We talk candidly, directly, and openly to the Chinese leadership through our diplomatic contacts. We talk extensively with not only the other 4 claimants, which are ASEAN countries, but also the relevant neighbors who have a stake in the peaceful and open region in Southeast Asia. We have put forward, and you will hear more about this from Secretary Kerry, a proposal that the claimants themselves, including China, and China is not alone in overreaching, can, on a voluntary basis, forego some of the provocative actions that are destabilizing, such as the reclamation of islands and the construction of bases, such as the building up of outposts and so on. So we use public messaging, we use diplomacy. We also engage in building the capacity of the countries in Southeast Asia to ensure that they are able to adequately police their own territorial waters and that they can maintain the domain awareness that ensures that they know what's going on in their contiguous waters or in the open seas. Our strategy, Senator, includes the support for a unified and influential ASEAN, and we believe that the call from the ASEAN countries to China to work with them, not to bully them, has a long-term salutary effect. Lastly, the fact of the matter is that the robust military presence, the strong security commitments, and the healthy alliances that the United States maintains with many countries in the region similarly serves to maintain stability and keep the peace going forward as it has for the last 6 decades.
I appreciate that comprehensive answer. We just had a gentleman in from the region who is very much a part of China, if you will, and I asked him why this was taking place, and if you want to synthesize his answer down to just a phrase, China's doing this because they can.
That
okay, so for years they couldn't. They weren't strong enough. Now they're a rising nation, and they can do what they're doing because they can. And I guess I listened to you, and I think I'm not in any way trying to be critical of you as an individual, but I hear all those things, and it doesn't appear to me that it's having the desired outcome. Now, maybe over the next 20 years as you build these capacities, maybe that's the case, but I guess I'm concerned that over the next 20 months, something happens that ends up creating a conflict or things get out of hand. I'm just wondering, what are some of the other things the administration might consider to ensure that something really catastrophic doesn't occur?
Well, thank you, Senator. We believe strongly that diplomacy is the right vehicle for addressing this set of problems. We also think that one critically important step will be for all of the claimants, not only China, but particularly China, to define its claims clearly in ways that are consistent with international law. Because the risk of an incident and confrontation that you allude to is driven by ambiguity over who is claiming what and on what basis. And so we have therefore urged China to set aside the legally ambiguous construct of a 9-dash line and instead make its claim. And we don't take a position. Its claims may be valid, but make a claim in terms that are consistent with international law. Number two, to pursue diplomatic or legal means to address it. We are also, as I mentioned, strengthening the capacity of the partners on an ongoing basis. I don't think this is a 20-year proposition, but it's not an overnight proposition either. China's, by its own assertion, China's interests lie in a stable and peaceful periphery. China has said, Chinese leaders have said, that they want quiet in their environment in order to concentrate on development and social and economic growth. They have not achieved stability or quiet. To the contrary, they have generated real strains in their relationships. And so the watchword that we advocate in the first instance is restraint, and big countries have a big responsibility to exercise it. Secondly, there are a range of very practical crisis prevention and crisis management initiatives that are in play in the region. And Secretary Kerry, who will be in the region for a 7th time to attend the ASEAN Regional Forum in August, is a strong advocate for and has held in-depth discussions, as he will again in August, on some of these very practical confidence-building measures and crisis prevention measures that include hotlines and include agreements on handling unplanned incidents at sea.
Well, thank you for being here. I'm going to turn it over to Chairman Cardin and go vote so folks back home will have confidence in me. Okay, thank you.
Well, Secretary Russell, let me thank you for not just your leadership on the bilateral relations between the United States and China, but your work in East Asia and the Pacific, and the manner in which you've worked with this committee and with the United States Senate. I do appreciate the close relationship and the sharing of information as we do to rebalance Asia. I think it's been in the best interest of the United States. And as you point out, the bilateral relationship between the United States and China involves many facets. There are areas where we have common interest, and we can hopefully find a path forward. One of those, quite frankly, is a peaceful resolution of the conflicts within the China Sea. It's not in China's interest to see military flare-ups or this become expanded, because they depend upon the commerce on the China Sea as we do, as the region does. So in my conversations with Chinese leaders, I think that they truly do not want to see a military flare-up on the China Seas, and they want to keep the lanes open. But it will take real leadership to have the rule of law prevail rather than the force of one country in determining the territorial disputes. We have a common interest on the environment, and it seems to me we can work together on that. We have some common interest in trade. The Chinese, the U.S. market's very important to China, and commerce between China and the United States is very important to America's economy. So we have a lot of common interest, and as you point out, we have some significant challenges. The Chinese progress on basic human rights is still very much troublesome. The ability to express your views contrary to the government in a safe and peaceful manner is certainly very much in question. The freedom of religion is a major issue, and the protection of intellectual property, and there's a lot of issues that that need to be managed between the United States and China. I found one thing you said about U.S. intentions, which I couldn't agree with you more. Our intentions is for China to continue to grow and be a constructive player in the region, that their economy will continue to grow. We're fully prepared to compete with any country in the world, including China, as long as it's a level playing field. So but we also need markets for our products, and as China's middle class grows, it provides consumers to buy American goods. So our intentions are clearly for China to continue its economic growth and do it in a way consistent with the respect for its neighbors and to be a constructive player in the region. But I must tell you, in my conversations with Chinese leaders, I don't think they believe that. It seems to me they believe that we are interested in holding China back and that the rebalance is more about keeping China isolated than it is about every country in the region growing. So can you just share with us your view, if you agree with me, if you disagree with me, please let me know, as to how we deal with creating better trust between the United States and China and do it in a way that doesn't compromise our positions on issues and our values, that we are pretty clear about what we expect in that relationship.
Well, Senator Cardin, first of all, thanks for your kind words, and thank you particularly for your leadership, especially on the Asia subcommittee. I very much agree with the points that you made in your statement, and I am very focused on the question of building strategic trust, both between the U.S. and China, but also between China and its neighbors, because the uncertainty and the concerns that China's neighbors and many Americans feel about China's long-term intentions, which among other things is fueled both by its problematic behavior with regard to territorial disputes, but also the opacity of its military modernization, represent an impediment to real progress both in the bilateral relationship, but also in regional growth. I believe that one of the essential ingredients to developing real trust, as opposed to papering over differences, is direct, high-level dialogue. China is a one-party state, and the ability to speak directly to Chinese leaders is uniquely important. Since taking office, President Obama has met with the Chinese president or the Chinese premier, I think something on the order of 19 times, which is extraordinary. But Secretary Kerry, along with other senior officials, similarly have maintained a very robust rhythm of high-level meetings, interspersed, as I mentioned, by telephone calls and so on. And the SNED, which is 2 weeks out, represents another important vehicle both for the high-level direct dialogue, but also for the important stakeholders in our respective departments of government and agencies who are working on projects or wrestling with disagreements through the course of the year to meet in person and to take stock of what they've done and to chart a program of work ahead for the coming year. A second area that is essential in building trust, I believe, is promoting people-to-people connections. And through our comprehensive high-level people-to-people dialogue, through our various educational exchanges, through our outreach programs to Chinese citizens and NGOs, and frankly through Chinese language training programs for Americans, we are ensuring that the next generation gets firsthand understanding of what the other culture and the other system is all about. Thirdly, the economic relationship, as you mentioned, is hugely important. And as China increasingly develops its own intellectual capital and acquires something worth protecting, we're confident that our messages about the need to protect intellectual property will start to ring true because the Chinese are suffering both from counterfeit materials but also from lack of innovation. And then lastly, as I alluded to, greater clarity in China's military modernization will be an important element of creating trust between China and the U.S. and its neighbors. We have a strong military-to-military dialogue that involves high-level exchanges. The Secretary of Defense has recently been to China. We've got other visits in the works, and we're working hard to remove the uncertainties and the ambiguities in connection with our military-to-military relationship, including by going so far as to include China in some of our multilateral exercises.
Well, thank you very much. I think that is gives us an agenda to work on this. It's not easy. I think people-to-people exchanges have been extremely helpful. When I was in China, one of my most enjoyable meetings was with students. It is a country that guards itself pretty carefully when it comes to expression of views. So students I found to be very refreshing in that regard. And I think we do have a real challenge on our hands to develop that trust consistent with our positions on issues, so it's very clear that for our strategic partnerships to grow, there are areas that need to be understood. And that comes from the framework that we have two different governments. We understand that. And our goal is to improve that relationship and to make the progress that's important for U.S. interests. We're going to take, you're excused. We're going to go to the second panel. Senator Menendez is going to be back in about a moment. So we're going to take a very short recess, and then Senator Menendez will reconvene the committee for the purposes of introducing the second panel.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.